Do you or your educational sales force find it challenging to teach your prospects to the right level? Watch this video to learn how. First of all, let's talk about one way to do this, and that is an important way to do this. If this is an audience you've never taught to or spoken to or presented to before, first of all, set the culture and the expectations for this event, for this activity. And the idea is to get them involved and let them understand how you do things and why you do it that way. That is to help them understand better. You're trying to give them value. Make sure you let them know why you're doing it the way you do and how that affects their benefit. So this is actually a matter of basically assuming complete ignorance of the audience. I'm not talking about stupidity. I'm talking about ignorance, as in that all of your audience or prospect members are beginner level in knowledge about what you're talking about. While at the same time, there's kind of a contradiction here, and that is that you assume there's somebody with PhD level knowledge of the same topic. That is, don't rely on ignorance. Assume ignorance so that you can teach everybody regardless of their level from the bottom up, but don't rely on ignorance thinking if I say something and it's wrong, who cares? Nobody in this audience will know. Think again, somebody probably will. I've had this experience and I was the audience member and I only have like a bachelor's degree and this guy was a PhD, so it happens. So what you can do to sort of set the expectation on this is you say, okay, everybody, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you know about this subject? Then pause, give them a chance to respond. Depending if it's a live audience, you pause for about 3 seconds. So it's like from 1 to 10, where are you? Give them a chance. Then a pregnant pause of 3 seconds. It's called a human moment. And then say, and be honest, sort of adding sort of a playful tone to it, smiling, because then they know, oh, okay, yeah, I know a little more. I'm trying to be humble. Or, okay, well, I really don't know that much. I'm not really an expert. So it helps loosen everybody up. It's really good. And it also tends to make them more willing to be honest and do things, which is what you're going to ask them next. And then say, well, look, since there's people in the room at X level, I'm going to teach to them because I want everybody to be able to follow along and understand and benefit from what we're going to talk about today. So if for some reason you can't do this gauging, and let's say it's a Zoom event and there's hundreds or thousands of people, you could still have them put it in the chat. So if you have the ability to do that, I would encourage you to, because then you could report, oh yeah, I see so we have some very beginners and some advanced here. It sets the expectations for the room and acknowledges that there's beginners in the room, so the advanced people understand that we can't teach at the advanced level. So if you can't do that, just say, look, I have to assume everybody is a beginner here. So let's start from there and we'll explain things in the simplest thing. It says, no matter what the level is, if you have a question, so this is something you're saying to them. It's like, okay, thank you, everybody. So I'm going to teach to the lowest level so everybody gets the benefit. By the way, this is in quotes here. By the way, no matter what your level is, please ask questions if you have them, because if you ask them, that means somebody else in the room wanted to ask them and they will benefit too. So it would really help out everybody, including me. So thank you very much. If nobody asks the questions and you have it, please be the one to ask the question. Okay, so let's see. Now for basically the duration of the talk, which should be short, 10 minutes maybe less. What you want to do is you want to talk in the most general usable terms for a lay audience, for the lowest members of your audience, but for your average everyday person to be able to follow along with what you're presenting. But as I said before, you should never rely on ignorance. If you do, someone in the audience, that was me in a talk I saw done by a neuroscientist, a PhD, and he made some statements, and I says, okay, I understand what you're saying, that these exercises will connect the corpus callosum, which is in the middle of your brain. It lets your left side and your right side of your brain talk to each other, okay? So I understand that your exercises would improve that, but how does that improve general intelligence? Do you have research to support that? So I was being skeptical, but I was also being honest. And I says, I understand this question's probably too detailed. We can talk about it later. I gave him that out, and he really didn't acknowledge it. He just says, yeah, we'll talk later, and then never got back to me. So this is why I came up with the idea of this talk. So you'd be better to prevent something like what happened, where I was the audience expert at just a bachelor's degree. And that is, if somebody brings something up, if you're relying on everybody in the audience to not know enough to ask a question like that, excuse me, I can see how it works. I agree it will work, but how does that improve general IQ, which is what you're saying this does? Do you have proof? That kind of a question, just assume somebody in the audience is not only qualified, but enthusiastic to ask that question. So don't assume ignorance assume ignorance for teaching, but don't rely on it for questions, for the level at which you might get responses back. So, because what happens if somebody asks you a question and you can't answer it, first of all, if you can't answer a question, you must say, I don't know. Answer the question honestly. If you have an answer, but it's too extended or too advanced, say, yeah, that's kind of detailed in advance. Please talk to me after the talk, or email me after the talk. I would love to elaborate with you more. And if they decide to be pushy and insist that you talk about it, say, please, for the consideration of the audience, I'm happy to talk to you about it, but let's do it after. Now, what's so important here is if you're asked a question, an advanced question, or somebody in the audience, because you relied on ignorance, asked a question you weren't prepared for. Robert Cialdini spoke about this in his book, Influence, New and Expanded, his latest version of Influence, that classic book on persuasion. And what he found is people who admit to not knowing something, or basically acknowledging a situation honestly, especially at the beginning of a conversation, increases the credibility of everything they say thereafter. So if something like that happens, own it, or prevent the question by not assuming ignorance, which is even better, then you don't have to deal with it. But if the worst should happen, acknowledge their point, and as I said, agree with it if you agree, but defer and put it outside the rest of the conversation if you can. I've already went over, if they insist, then let them know, basically invoke the consideration of the rest of the audience, and that you're happy to acknowledge it. Now, this is extremely unlikely to happen, but if the rest of the audience goes, no, we want to hear about this, then you're pretty much obligated, or you're going to lose all credibility. And if that happens, I jumped ahead of myself here, more in here than there. Okay, basically, if that happens, say, okay, this is going to get a little advanced, so I'm just going to have to speak at a higher level. I'm sorry if I lose you. And then go on as though they are basically experts. That is, give them the minimum amount of expertise that's required to answer the question. So essentially what this comes down to is, if you're going to present, especially if you're presenting as an expert to an audience of unknown level, set expectations, encourage questions, assume ignorance with respect to teaching, but never rely on ignorance with respect to your audience's response and what questions they may ask. Okay, so I put it this way, basically, in summary, assume complete ignorance, beginner level of knowledge, encourage questions, but never rely on the audience's ignorance. Instead, assume it contains at least one expert. That's it for Crush It Club 110, How to Teach and Sell Well. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.